Take your seats. The program will begin momentarily. The Atlantic promotes and protects the free exchange of ideas through prohibiting the physical or virtual disruption, shouting down, blocking, or suppressing an invited speaker's right to speak. Please note, disruptions of this nature will result in removal from the venue. Thank you for your support of this event. Please welcome Executive Vice President of Atlantic Live, Candace Montgomery.
What a room. You all look fantastic. Welcome. As you heard, I'm Montgomery, Executive Vice President of Atlantic Live, head of all the events and experiences in real life and screens across the country. I want to see a show of hands for all the subscribers in the room. Wow. No, but thank you all for your support of the Atlantic's journalism. And welcome, and thank you for joining us today for our On the Future and Atlantic Festival event. Today will be an afternoon of rigorous discourse, exploring how recent shifts in politics and policies are reshaping domestic and international societal dynamics. We've convened influential leaders across industries, policy, finance, defense, tech, health, and climate to understand the future of America and its place in an ever more complex world. Before we get started, I want to thank our underwriters, Elastic and Ogilvy, for their support of Atlantic's journalism today. Welcome you to share your experience on social media by using the hashtags OnTheFuture and TAF25. You can also support our journalism by subscribing to Atlantic by visiting theatlantic.com/subscribe. Now, let's get started.
For a special presentation of Washington Week Live with The Atlantic, please welcome Atlantic staff writers Tim Alberta, Ashley Parker, Anne Applebaum, and Tom Nichols, with Atlantic Editor-in-Chief Jeffery Goldberg.
Hi, good afternoon. It's a very narrow stage. This is kind of a test of our back. It's like incredible. Oh yeah, it's very nice. There's some people in the White House all right off this. This is very serious. I'm sorry. Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Goldberg, Editor-in-Chief of The Atlantic, the moderator of Washington Week on TV, YouTube, or something. Anyway, welcome to Washington Week. Thank you for coming. You know who all my colleagues are, and we would jump into where the Trump administration 306 go here. There'll be sandwiches. You guys just come back every 100 days for the next 4 years, and we'll just, paying you to do that by a certain point. As some of you know, Ashley last year had illuminated encounter with the Thursday, and I thought about all of the days. I would ask you all a little bit of a why we're now best friends.
It feels like you're. Yeah.
I'm next 100 meetup and trying to do and the
Or the posts and one. And the way it happened was Jeff. I started to come from the Washington Post. The Atlantic never promises covers, so trying to remarkable political during those 4 years in the wilderness that are informing how he is wielding a lot more creative, willing to shatter through. We go through the normal process. We write to the White House. We'd love to sit down. Schedule is going to happen. City and like it that much. An aide says we have view is off. And I'm like, what? Basically, a wider circle of someone who didn't them things I had said on written in story, like off the social, the interview's off. He calls us names, calls me.
Just so you understand, of Ashley was that she argues that he lost. And that was one of her main sins. Argued that.
Again, picks up and so minutes with President Trump. Afterwards, we say, called up. We interviewed him, and advisor says very.
And no one knew that Michael was
not in advance. Someone had walked in while they were chatting and then started messaging people on them. To the White House, we did an interview. Finish the story. In the and we
finished. I mean, it literally out there.
You and Michael. The White House tomorrow to interview the president. Promised and getting in.
Right, and you could read there. When we've also posted pretty. Their story, about their conclusion, really about what, but about the sort of the whole.
The thing that
don't use because this is.
that I wanted, he felt like somehow the best that this almost kind of after now he had to, he wants to be, he think of himself, and this really comes through the story, as consequential and a mover and a shaker. It doesn't matter what direction he moves anything in, just the conservatives in Canada. He's look how I took it for our guys. And I think that was just something interesting to me. Showed once again that he doesn't really have a political North Star that isn't him.
Right. Let me ask you this, because we talk about Ukraine a lot. One of the questions I asked him had to do with lack of sympathy Ukraine as many of you know this. He's rededicated the Oval Office. Ronald Reagan in pride of bipartisan for 100 years, at least in the small people, and then Russia again, of who doesn't. I want to ask, Anne is the leading expert imperial behavior. I wanted to ask what you make Trump as
I mean, surely the answer is sympathize with in the kind of Hollywood good guys in politics isn't about trying to safe. I know people kept explaining the power of China places because break this rules, and there's a big international system. And people would say that his any foreign policy initiative to him in Signalgate, but kept back at him in the interview. Am I the victor of this conversation? And maybe also in the case of Ukraine and Russia, I can't negotiation, but none of the strategic questions we think are important, or that we thought were important, or that thought were important, or really that any president have thought were important for the last decades, they just don't. You're right.
And I don't mean this in a, doesn't know that they exist.
The same thing. They are care about. He doesn't think. Denmark earlier this year, I was in right after a horrible confusing moment. I got there. I had all these. I was actually supposed to see the prime minister, foreign minister, and like one by one, everybody canceled on me, and there was kind of hysteria in Copenhagen because of the phone call. And there was one point I was walking back and forth trying to this part. They kept changing. What EU and NATO and so on, what was that everything, and they go drill right now. Go. You used to have more. They even one So there was nothing that he could explain. Looks very large on a Mercator projection, and he just wanted to have it be part of the United States. And they didn't get it, and it created this political crisis in Denmark as they were trying to understand what this meant. And I feel like that keeps again with tariffs. Is it about bringing back manufacturing? Is it about doing? I mean, and I'm not sure there is. See what happened and win.
To the sort of with Ashley and others, the question of what actually motivates him or he understands the world. But I want to ask him about the Republican Party. You're one of the foremost chroniclers of the fairly radical changes that have taken place in Republicanism over the past decade. And with that, and listening to endorse cause of a decade ago of the Republic, right? McCain is the opposite of Trumpism, especially when it comes to understanding America's exceptional role in the world. How do you, I mean, walk us through this a little bit. How do you explain the 100% change in the way the Republicans think about America and its role in the world?
You know, to answer that question, and I'll try to be as succinct as I possibly can be because there's a lot of ground to cover, but I think we have to recognize that the roots of this go back so much farther, so much deeper than Donald Trump. You know, in a book that I had written 6-7 years ago, I was recounting this scene that during George W. Bush's presidency, where he's sitting down with a couple of his advisors after the midterm election, after the 2006 midterm election, and he had already seen after his own reelection in 2004 a couple of his big signature initiatives that the White House had really poured capital into, Social Security reform and immigration reform, basically die on the vine. And the intensity, the ferocity of the pushback that he and his advisors were seeing from the Republican base during this time, we're talking 07-ish, was really alarming to them. And they were seeing that the Republican base was changing kind of right in front of their eyes. And Bush said to a couple of his advisors, he said, there are these isms, this nativism, this protectionism, this isolationism. And Bush turned to Karl Rove and he said, these isms are going to eat us alive, us meaning the Republican Party. And boy, what a prescient scene to think about how, you know, we mentioned John McCain. Just a year later, with McCain putting Sarah Palin on the ticket and the sort of, the kind of proud, not just populism, but let's be candid about it, sort of an anti-intellectualism that she represented, a backlash against the elites, against the universities, against the money, against the well-educated, all of these things. And then you start to see this snowball into the Tea Party era at the beginning of the Obama presidency, with presenting sort of a kingmaker in the Republican Party. And suddenly, there was sort of a choice that was becoming apparent for more and more of the Republican Party's leadership, more and more of the conservative movement's leadership, which was you can either jump on this populist runaway train or you can become irrelevant. And what we began to see was that more and more of folks, the McCains, the Romneys of the world, who tried